Donald Trump just let Larry Hoover walk free. Sort of. That's right. Trump commuted the sentence of the man once known as the founder of the Gangster Disciples, a Chicago street organization that shaped national crime policy and stoked public fear for generations. Hoover was serving multiple life sentences in ADX Florence, the most brutal supermax prison in America, locked down in solitary for nearly 30 years. Back in 1973, Hoover was convicted of murder. By 1998, he was hit with federal charges for running a criminal enterprise while behind bars. But over time, Hoover claimed that he turned his life around. He renounced gang life, he got legal help, and he begged the system for mercy. The courts, however, would not budge. A White House official confirmed the move, not like a normal bells and whistles, pomp and circumstance kind of situation. The White House confirmed the commutation quite quietly, saying that it hadn't been formally announced yet. But Larry Hoover's attorney said that it was a, quote, historic development and true justice, calling out the courts for ignoring their client's transformation. Hoover, now 74 years old, will be released from federal custody, but there's a catch. He still faces a 200-year state sentence for murder. The federal charges came decades after the state conviction. So what does this all mean? That's interesting. First of all, and there's multiple levels to this, multiple layers to this, and I want to really make sure we get at it, all of them. The first thing that we have to talk about when we think about the sentence and what it all means. Donald Trump decided to commute a federal sentence for someone who's looking at 8 life sentences in state prison. So in other words, Donald Trump as president does not have the power to pardon or commute anybody's state sentence. He can only handle things that are under the purview of the federal government. That means that he can pardon a federal prisoner. He can't pardon or commute a state prisoner. That is the issue here. So technically, not even technically, as a practical matter, it doesn't mean a whole lot for Donald Trump to commute the sentence. Now, you may say it does symbolically. You might be right. You might even say practically it does if it's part of a bigger strategy, a bigger game plan. In other words, maybe the governor of Illinois, J. Pritzker, is going to also do the same thing. Because if J.B. Pritzker does the same thing, then yeah, it works. Otherwise, he's just going from federal prison to state prison. Now, if I'm fighting for my life and I'm fighting to get out, then absolutely, this is one rung on the ladder that's been climbed. And now I move on to the next rung. I get it. But I'm watching people on the internet, and this is why I hate the internet. I'm watching people on social media. I'm watching people make certain celebrities even are making pages saying, "Welcome home. Larry Hoover's home now." I was like, no, he's not. He ain't even left the federal pen, but when he does, he's going to the state pen. So please stop spreading that misinformation, y'all. Larry Hoover is not home. And if nothing else happens, Larry Hoover is not coming home. That's the first thing. So why would Donald Trump do this? It could be to satisfy some people who have asked for this, who he feels he owes a debt to, or who are willing to do some quid pro quo. You saw Kanye West passionately advocate for Larry Hoover's release. You even heard Larry Hoover's his son, on the Donda album talking about it on one of the interludes. So we know that there's some pressure here. We've heard other people make the push. So that's part of it. Donald Trump also has a very kind of cynical strategy around how he moves. It wouldn't shock me if he's doing this just to be in the good graces of black folk, because there's so many black men in particular who want Larry Hoover released, or who haven't really thought about it. But when they say Trump released a black man, they say Trump is here for us. This is the kind of ridiculous bullshit that he does. Now, what's interesting is if he does commute Larry Hoover's sentence, and it seems like he has, you can expect you can expect, what's his name? He killed George Floyd. Darren Wilson killed Mike Brown. I'm thinking of, it'll come to me in a second. But anyway, you can expect that Derek Chauvin. You can expect that Derek Chauvin will also be. Thank y'all for letting me know. You can also expect that Derek Chauvin will also be released or commuted or pardoned. In his case, it might be pardoned. But similarly, Derek Chauvin has a couple decades of state time. So there's always a journey or a process. But the idea here might be that Donald Trump is using the pardon and commutation process as a site of political struggle and as a form of political strategy designed to draw in unnatural alliances. In other words, black people who should be voting in their interests who might vote for Donald Trump against their interests simply because he's releasing your favorite rapper. That's the hope I'm saying that Donald Trump has. I'm not dissing black voters. I'm saying that's how Donald Trump thinks about it. That's why I said it's a cynical strategy. But then there's a question of, should Larry Hoover be released? Now, you're talking to an abolitionist, so, my answer is going to be a little different. Larry Hoover is, and the Gangster Disciples, the GDs, are a street organization. I think it's important for us to understand gangs beyond the way that they're represented in popular media. Gangs in the United States are part of a broader struggle among the black lumpen proletariat and the black proletariat, but particularly the lumpen proletariat. That's who Huey Newton was talking about. I'm talking about the gangsters, the pushers, the drug dealers, the pimps. The people who are the unemployables, who are at the bottom of the American economic ladder, who have been operating in the shadows and moving in a certain way. There's a way that gang life, just like the Black Panthers, everybody was looking at them as a site of possibility for political transformation. If we could organize the drug deals, if we could organize the gangsters and get them to do something different, life could be different, not just for them, but for all of us. This was the idea. This was Huey Newton's idea, right? To radicalize the lumpen proletariat. I'm with it. And a lot of these Chicago street organizations are not take Chicago off the table. A lot of these street organizations, a lot of these, which we call gangs, are rooted in those same principles and values. So I don't want to make it seem as if everybody who's part of El Rukni, everybody who's a part of the Vice Lords, everybody who's a part of, Peace Don't Reign. They're all these, several of these share the same genealogy, but Crips, Bloods, whatever. I don't want people to assume that it's just about violence and that there's not a political angle and there's not a radicalized vision in there and that it's not about brotherhood and all these other things. And Jim Jones had a great dialogue about that on JVP with us. But we also have to be honest about what happened. These street organizations have done more than street shit, but on the whole, these street organizations have caused so much death, so much harm, so much trauma. And it's happening to us, right? These organizations aren't walking around doing drive-bys on white people. They're not up in the suburbs, killing and exploiting our rich white counterparts. That's not what's happening. So we have to be honest about that. And I think Larry Hoover has been honest about that. Larry Hoover has talked about what he did in the past. He's talked about what the organization did in the past. He also talked about how he let it all go. He hasn't called a shot in decades. He's talking about the fact that he's trying to transform his life around and turn the pain that he caused into good, but he starts from acknowledging that he caused pain. That's something that some of y'all caping for the GDs and caping for Larry Hoover don't acknowledge. I'm saying let's listen to Larry Hoover. Larry Hoover acknowledges what he did wrong. He acknowledges the harm he's caused, and he wants to work to correct it. To me, that does warrant a release. I'm okay with Larry Hoover being released. I'm okay with most people being released because, again, I don't think that incarceration, that caging people is the solution. This is the dilemma that we always get in. It's just, well, what does the alternative look like? How do we fix this problem? How do we fix these other problems without something? I have an abolitionist answer that we can talk about another time. But at the core, this is the tension that many of us are wrestling with as we hear Larry Hoover is going to be freed from federal prison and could potentially be freed altogether if the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, decides to follow suit on Trump. Now, Pritzker was elected, I think 6 years ago now, almost 6. He's coming up on the final year very soon. And so this would be the time to pardon somebody who's unpopular. This would be the time to let some shit go, let somebody out just because. But I'm like, why would the Democratic governor of Illinois side with Trump in releasing a black member of a street organization? I'm not saying it's wrong to release him. I'm saying I just don't get what Trump's angle here. Trump doesn't do things because it's the right thing to do. He doesn't do things because it feels good. He does things because there's something in it for him. So I'm trying to figure out what that thing might be and how we could get at that. Anyway, this story is going to be super interesting as we watch Larry Hoover move from federal custody to state custody to see how the state carries it, see how the governor carries it. We know Governor Pritzker wants to be president, and at the very worst wants to be on the ticket. So a move like this could work, or it could backfire, depending on how you see your base. That's something that we'll have to talk about in the future, but I'm super excited about the possibilities for all of it.